Good afternoon, everyone. Classmates, Dr. Channing, glad you all could join us for our presentation. We look forward to talking with you through the project that we worked on over the last few weeks. My name is Michael Webb. I currently serve as one of the directors of development for the College of Arts and Sciences. I had the pleasure to work with Carla Leybold on this project, and I will let Carla introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Carla Leybold. I'm the recruitment and assessment coordinator / alumni and student programs manager for the Honors College. I guess my current title is alumni and student programs manager. And thank you, classmates and Dr. Channing, for tuning in and viewing our presentation. And we look forward to hearing your comments at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. So our topic is declining diversity and increasing student debt, the effects of rising tuition on campus inclusion efforts and on furthering debt disparities for students of color. As higher education practitioners, we face a lot of issues. We know those issues that we face. And some of those issues that we faced are issues that have been around for a long time. Things like curriculum changes, shared governance, the student success, all of those things that we face, to new issues that we face, like the coronavirus pandemic that we've only been faced with over the last 6 months. But we don't often in our sector take a step back and see how those issues interrelate and how they affect one another and how they play against each other. So what we're going to be talking about is how diversity, enrollment, and rising tuition intersect and interplay with each other. And these three issues are hot button topics within higher education, and we hear about them daily in the media. So we're going to be dealing with two initial facts, and these facts are going to be kind of the cornerstone foundation that we base our argument on as we go through this presentation. First, the National Center of Educational Statistics. Tuition, room, and board rose $4,800 from 2008 to 2018, a nearly 25% increase over those 10 years. As we all know, that was a time of great tumult here in the United States and across the world. That was time with the Great Recession, in which state appropriation dollars for higher education declined, which led many higher education administrators trying to figure out how to find that gap in revenue, and we found it in tuition increases. Another issue there during that time was enrollment was growing kind of across higher education. The second fact that we are dealing with is that higher education is not insulated from the law of demand. We all understand supply and demand. Market demand is negatively related to the price. In layman's terms, that is that as prices go up, the demand for those items goes down, and we are not insulated from that within higher education. So now we're going to look at the interrelationship between rising tuition and overall enrollment. So in 1975, Jackson and Weatherby found that for every $100 increase in tuition, there would be a decrease in enrollment ranging from 0.05% to 1.4%. We could take a step back and say that's 45 years ago, doesn't really play today, that data is outdated. However, Helmut and Marcotte in 2011 found that they utilized an average tuition of $4,200 and an average total enrollment of 10,000 students. And for every $100 increase in tuition, that would result in an enrollment loss of 25 students. So we see almost identical data sets nearly 45 years apart. So what we're seeing is that negative relationship between rising tuition and overall decline in enrollment. And that's been playing out over the last few decades. Carla is now going to talk to us about some of the other interrelated relationships between these issues in higher education.
Thank you, Michael. So what does increasing tuition do to the diversity of our campuses? Allen and Wolniak, in a 2018 study, found that for every $1,000 increase in tuition and fees at non-selective public institutions, the enrollment of diverse students dropped by 4.5%. And this particular statistic is actually the enrollment among full-time, first-time freshman students. And that's important when we get to our policy recommendations. One of our policy recommendations is aiming to address the enrollment declines that tuition increases have on that particular population of incoming new first-year students. So their findings suggest that tuition increases at open access, non-selective public four-year institutions, such as ETSU. We are almost the definition of that type of institution. Tuition increases at these institutions are negatively and significantly associated with a decline in racial and ethnic diversity on campus. We already know the benefits of diversity and enrollment of underrepresented student populations to the campus as a whole. So that is really something that it is incumbent upon us as higher education leaders to take into account when we're thinking about tuition increases, knowing that tuition increases result in an overall enrollment decline, but an even more significant and marked enrollment decline for students from diverse populations. Again, this affects the entire campus, the educational quality that all students receive, not only underrepresented students. Student loan debt is another issue that goes along with tuition increases. So one way that students are paying for the tuition increases that institutions of higher education have been implementing each year is by taking out student loans. While we do recognize that student loans are a solid and a good educational investment, they absolutely are, as long as students are borrowing responsibly and taking out amounts equal to what they need to cover the cost of their education, and are not doing things like buying cars or taking vacations with their loans. So we recognize, yes, student loans are valuable and they are a good investment. But we as university leaders are kind of complicit in this ever-growing student loan burden that students are facing, insofar as when we increase tuition, it requires students to take out higher loan amounts. These higher loan amounts particularly affect students of color. So from a social justice perspective, it's also very important to think about what we are doing when we increase tuition and the effects that it has on students from underrepresented populations. A 2016 analysis by the Brookings Institution found that Black college graduates had on average $25,000 more student loan debt than white graduates. And this was for the cohort of 2012, the entering cohort of 2012, the cohort that graduated in 2012. 4 years later, in 2016, the debt was $25,000 more for Black students than for white. What's really interesting about that is that debt was, at the time of graduation, only about a difference of about $7,500. So as you can see, that 4 years after graduation, that gap has increased and widened. That's due to a couple of reasons. Some are beyond the scope of our presentation. But one of them is, well, they all actually do relate back to the social justice implications that we need to think about with regard to increasing tuition. One of the reasons that Black and to a lesser extent Hispanic graduates have such divergent amounts of debt is that they are often saddled with much higher interest rates, and they can actually end up owing more 4 years after graduation than they borrowed, which is quite striking. So, sorry, skipped ahead here.
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. All right, so our key findings. For the past 10 years, each year, tuition has increased on average $480 per year. We get that figure from the National Center for Education Statistics, where we saw that tuition has increased $4,800 over the last decade. So that's an average of $480 per year. So that is a real increase, especially for students who are of lower income backgrounds. $480 to some of us may not seem like that big of a deal, but that is a big deal for students from lower income backgrounds. And of course, you also have to consider that that amount of increase tends to happen each year. So by the time a student graduates, hopefully in 4 years, it's a $2,000 difference in tuition that they're paying higher than they had been. And we already know, as we've established, that increases in tuition decrease the enrollment of students from diverse populations. Again, knowing the benefits of diversity to a college campus, it's incumbent upon us to do what we can to mitigate the effects of increased tuition on lower enrollment of students from diverse backgrounds, as well as from a social justice perspective again. Since institutions like ETSU are in fact the institutions that prove most often as an access point for students from underrepresented populations, we really need to ensure that we do not decrease access by increasing tuition for these students. Non-selective public institutions like ETSU, on average, were found by Allen and Wolniak to enroll a population that is about 42% students of color, whereas highly selective institutions are enrolling only 25% of the student body from underrepresented populations. So we are serving, and this is laudable, we are serving as an entry point for lots of students from underrepresented backgrounds and lower income backgrounds. But we do need to be cognizant of the effects that increased tuition has on this population. And again, Black and to a lesser extent, Hispanic college graduates hold much more student debt than white college graduates. As we all know, student debt for everyone is a huge issue for not just the families and the individuals who have that debt, but for our economy as a whole. Students with high debt loads delay home purchases, they delay starting a family, they delay marriage. All of those things have negative effects on the overall economy. Thank you.
So I want to also kind of jump back to your point there, that actually some anecdotal evidence here at ETSU that I would like to share. Our advisors within the College of Arts and Sciences found a couple of years ago, when they were talking to students that were no longer going to be coming to ETSU, when they were asked, well, why, and if it was a financial issue, the average money that those students were leaving ETSU on was less than $1,000. And so I think, again, anecdotally, that shows that kind of same, the Allen and Wolniak study kind of playing out here at ETSU. So we've talked about the interplay between the rising tuition, diversity, and enrollment. So as higher ed administrators, what should we do? What should we do with this, with these facts? Number one, we should be aware of the negative effects of rising tuition has on a diverse student enrollment, and what a declining diverse student enrollment does to the overall environment of higher education. So we need to understand the relationship between tuition and enrollment. One policy recommendation that could help mitigate those concerns is freezing tuition at freshman levels. And what we mean by that is, if a student comes in their freshman year and let's say their tuition is $5,000 for the year, they don't know that if that tuition is going to increase their sophomore or junior or senior year. In many cases it does. And so what we would propose is that as a student comes in, they know that the price that they pay their freshman year is the price that they're going to pay their sophomore, junior, and senior year. This would allow them to do more planning. It would allow them to apply appropriate scholarships throughout their 4 years and know what their net price is for their whole 4 years. We do think that that would help retention and carry those students through their undergraduate experience. Carla's going to talk to us a little bit about some options for increasing scholarships for diverse populations.
Thank you. So, yeah, another benefit actually that freezing tuition at freshman levels would have, if we were to do that and say that it would be available for 4 years, is it really would provide an incentive to graduate within 4 years. That would help improve our outcomes in terms of what the state is looking at, and in terms of our IPEDS, integrated post-secondary education data system. We have to report on cohort graduation rates. We do get 6 years in order to count a student as a graduate, but they also do look at 4-year, 5-year, and 6-year graduation rates. The higher the 4-year graduation rate is, the better for the institution. So that would be an incentive also for students to graduate within 4 years. The other option that we thought of that would help ameliorate the effects of tuition increases on students from underrepresented populations is perhaps an enhancement of our existing diversity scholarships. We're already offering diversity scholarships to students from underrepresented backgrounds. So Michael and I thought of an idea called a dynamic diversity scholarship. The goal of that would be to give students a scholarship that would equal to or exceed the cost of the tuition increase from year to year. So for example, a first-year student in the fall of 2021 could apply for a dynamic diversity grant in the amount of, say, $500 if our tuition next year is $500 more than it is this year. And then that same grant amount would be available each year, up to 6 years in this particular case, we're thinking. It would be available up to 6 years of continuous enrollment at that same level, which should, even though tuition fluctuates, some years the increase is higher than others, we think that capturing that scholarship award at the first year's increase would balance out over a period of 4 to 6 years, and would really help alleviate the effects of tuition increases on the student body, and especially, again, because we'd be offering this to incoming first-year students, and it would be a grant or a scholarship offsetting the tuition difference between that year and the previous year's tuition. So that would help us to not see such a drastic decline in the enrollment of full-time, first-time students of color in particular. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. We look forward to the conversation that we'll have on our discussion board, and look forward to answering the questions that you may have and the thoughts that you have. As we wrap up, I will share our references here. We'll also be posting the PowerPoint to our discussion board. And again, we look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.